Good morning. Welcome to the June 6th Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg. May we keep in mind this week special worldwide appreciations of the environment and of the oceans, and for best friends as well. We gather to be in community, a community devoted to growth in understanding and caring for all souls, seeking to learn from all persons, all peoples, and all of life, and to care for them. If you are new here today or relatively new and would like to learn more about our tradition, please get in touch with me. Contact information is posted at the end of this service. Many thanks this morning to John, James, Allison, Daisy, and Bayer, our grandkids, for contributing to our service with words, music, production, and spirit. And special thanks to all of you who make us a blessed congregation. May our time together help us grow.
Hi, I am Bear Riggs.
I am Daisy Riggs.
And I'm Allison Donovan, and we're your worship associates this morning.
To begin our service, we light our chalice as a symbol of our search for truth and meaning, our shared communion, and our light of caring.
Join, if you will.
Join, if you will, in the words of our covenant.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Our invocation this morning is from Reverend Kathleen McTeague of the UU Service Committee. Perhaps with a sigh of relief and peace, hear it both as prayer and as meditation. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edges of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes, this house of laughter and silence, memory and hope, is hallowed by our presence together. A breath now for laughter. A breath now for silence. A breath now for remembrance. A breath now for hope. A breath now for wholeness and holiness. And now our opening hymn.
I was a poor, wayfaring stranger, a traveling through a world of woe, where life was sickness, toil and danger. I had no hope, no place to go. I prayed to God, I'd find my people. I prayed to God, no more to roam. I prayed, God, take me over Jordan. I prayed, God, take me over home. Then this great sky spread out before me. Then these green hills gave me my place. Then life's warm sun poured all around me, and life's sweet love shone on my face. A word of faith My neighbors gave me a prayer of hope. My friends brought forth a touch of love, has made me welcome. A light of love has led me home. And now I am forever grateful and live for all to know such love. And now I strive to live as blessing, with love on earth as heavens above. I speak of faith in our great caring. I pray in hope that each might come to bathe in love as in the Jordan, and join us here on shores of home.
I have a question for us all. Have you ever cried wolf? You know the story about the boy who was always afraid and crying wolf. The wolf was about to attack and everybody would come running, but there was never a wolf until they finally stopped coming when he cried. And when the wolf did come, there was nobody there to help him. The moral of the story, of course, is to try to make sure that you're not always crying wolf when there's no need. So people will take you seriously when you really do need help, and they will come. Maybe for a badly scraped knee, or for a homework assignment, or cutting the grass when it's just too high, or for getting the snake out of the swimming pool. All kinds of reasons when you really do need help. But the hard part is, if you wait too long to cry for help, it may be too late if there really is trouble. So my advice is, yes, learn about yourself, about whether you're always too fast to cry wolf or too slow, and learn about how people respond. But do know who you can call for advice, at least for advice, if not for help. And that is what a church is for. People you get to know and trust, and who will answer your call when you cry wolf or trouble, and will at the very least talk with you about it and help you decide whether there really is a real wolf, or just a shadow, or maybe a really nice woolly dog. May our lives be mainly full of really nice woolly dogs and people who pay attention to us when we call, if we cry wolf, and who know the difference between a wolf and a woolly. Have a great week. Now time for us to recall and share our joys and concerns. You can share your joy or concern in the sidebar on your YouTube screen with us this morning, or you can wait until the coffee hour after the service and share. Or during the week, you can let me or Bill Motter, chair of our worship committee, know of your joy or concern that you might like shared during the service, spoken at this time. This week has shown a light on the horrors of the Tulsa race massacre 100 years ago. 2 days in 1921, during which an armed white army destroyed 40 square city blocks, making homeless about 10,000 people, killing about 300 people in a prosperous black area called the Black Wall Street of America, and undermining safety, prosperity, and happiness for the 4 generations alive at the time of Black Americans, and affecting the subsequent well-being of 5 more generations so far to this time, if you count 20 years as a new generation. So the Bible is wrong. The sins of the fathers are visited upon more than just for subsequent generations of children, but often not just on your own children. Our times are perilous in many dimensions, more perilous for many Black families and people than for white families and people. May our gathering in community give us understanding, strength, and caring to share with every dimension of our world. May we be there for each other, no matter our race, gender, color, beliefs. May we be there for one another. Now our first reading.
Our first reading is the covenant inscribed in the constitutional bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are part. The bylaws continue by defining these purposes of the National Association in relationship to the local congregations. The Unitarian Universalist Association shall devote its resources to and exercise its corporate powers for religious, educational, and humanitarian purposes. The primary purpose of the association is to serve the needs of its member congregations, to organize new congregations, extend and strengthen Unitarian Universalist institutions, and implement its principles. The Unitarian Universalist Association is a voluntary association of autonomous, self-governing member congregations which have freely chosen to pursue common goals together. Nothing in this bylaws shall be construed as infringing upon the congregational polity or internal self-government of member congregations.
This great song was written by the late great folk singer from San Francisco, John Fromer. Ready, orchestra? Hit it! We need the Buddhists and the Baptists,
the Quakers and Catholics too,
the atheists and the agnostics,
Muslims and Jews.
We need people of all nations,
all colors and all creeds,
to put an end to war, put an end to greed. Gonna take us all to make a change, take us all to win the peace. Gonna take us all in the streets, gonna take us all, gonna take us all. We need your friends and your neighbors,
the poets and the painters,
the socialists and the anarchists,
the pacifists and the humanists,
every culture and community,
people black and white and brown.
at times we won't see eye to eye, but we stand on common ground. Gonna take us all to make a change, take us all to win the peace. Gonna take us all in the streets, gonna take us all to make a change, all to win the peace, all out in the streets. Gonna take us all, gonna take us all, gonna take us all, gonna take us all.
Our second reading is the list of sources the UU tradition draws on in promoting free and responsible searches for truth and meaning. The tradition we share draws from many sources: direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Words and deeds of prophetic women and men, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Humanist teachings, which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and the spirit. Spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions, which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature.
In today's sermon, I'd like to talk with you about the ends of racism and of Unitarian Universalism. But first, what is your understanding of our congregational movement? I wonder if yours corresponds to mine. I hope so. But my understanding of our end goal, our path there, and our progress for progressing is this. First, our visionary end goal can be described as a world community of peace, liberty, and justice for all, within a respected, interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. So good so far? Second, our path to that end goal is the fulfillment of every person's and people's spiritual potentials for understanding and caring for life in every dimension of relationship, with self, with all others, and with the source of all in all. Our association's covenant principles and purposes give a particular definition to these potentials. Third, our process as a movement on this path is to congregate locally in self-governing religious communities to help one another and our world grow to spiritual fulfillment. In short, I'd put it, we gather in self-governing local congregations, associating for consultation with like-minded congregations to help develop the potentials in ourselves and all people that will lead to relationships of goodwill and well-being worldwide. My understanding of the past 150 to 200 years of Unitarian Universalist history is that our spiritual development mission has often been less than central and primary in our congregations, sometimes because of lack of skills, but often because the voices calling for primary focus on justice drowned out the voices calling for the centrality of spiritual growth as the bedrock for justice and for caring. People need to have a place for spiritual strengthening so they can go out as strong allies to movements and organizations whose primary focus is justice. This key reality often seems to get lost in the anxiety and urgency of injustice and oppression. It seems to me that the UUA board, its Commission on Institutional Change, and the Eighth Principle advocates are now trying to institute this reversal of priorities once again, requiring spiritual development to stand aside for an enforced focus on justice, or a particular form of justice. In 2017, there was anger among some UU people of color and white Unitarian Universalists after the UUA hired a white male minister over an Hispanic female layperson and UUA board member, amongst other people, as a UUA regional lead officer. In the turmoil, the UUA president and Hispanic man himself resigned under the vituperation, but made clear his view that the hiring choice was not influenced by the woman's ethnicity or gender. The personnel files are sealed, so we won't learn what the reality is. Shortly thereafter, though, the UUA board held a private session, out of which came a declaration that Unitarian Universalism is based on a white supremacy culture, and through it perpetuates the harming of people of color and other marginalized groups of people. No rationale was ever provided for the board's declaration. But based on its own undemocratic declaration, the board then directed its appointed Commission on Institutional Change, the COIC, to answer this question: how much harm has Unitarian Universalism done to people of color? What do people of color say? Not a question of whether UUism has done harm to people of color, but how much it has harmed them. As I understand, the methodology of this study was a general invitation to answer that question. It invited any person of color somehow connected with UUism to tell how they were harmed by experience with Unitarian Universalism. Since only stories of harm were asked for, only stories of harm were collected. The protocol, as I understand it, was that the stories should be accepted unquestioned and unvalidated, because to do so would cause further harm. Standard research practices of hypothesis, data collection, verification, analysis, consideration of alternative hypotheses were not followed in reaching conclusions. Other than feeling sad that some people felt negatively about their connection and experience with Unitarian Universalism, I see no reason to take the findings of the COIC as a true picture of UU congregational life or welcoming, much less a verified explanation of why the proportion of people of color in UU congregations is less than their proportion in the general population. Moreover, the proportion of people of color in UUism has been growing from 11% in 1990 to 25% in 2008, and I hope toward parity since then. Nonetheless, from the board declaration and the COIC report has emerged to the eighth principle, calling for all UU congregations and congregants to be held accountable for a white supremacy culture and to stop harming marginalized people. The instrument of accountability and discipline, it appears, is to be established and overseen by the UUA board over any congregations that are deemed not in compliance with national UUA standards. This is to be written into it is proposed that this be written into the UUA bylaws, overriding the requirement that the UUA operate in service to congregations under congregational polity and that local congregational governance is inviolable. This would be the end of congregational polity. And given the weakness of democratic process in the makeup and work of the UUA General Assembly, it looks like we may see the end of congregational democratic decision-making. If the character of the overall UU organization continues to evolve in this way, as it will try to do over the next 2 years, here's what I'd expect to see in the future. Less money given to support the UUA, fewer people willing to remain members of UU congregations, some congregations leaving the UUA, some congregations simply closing, loss of UU communities that prioritize humanistic spiritual growth and the caring and justice that come from that growth, fewer contributors then to compassion, justice, equity, liberty, and peace. What do I hope we will do? Rewrite the proposed eighth principle to be a study action statement of conscience rather than a constitutional bylaw principle. Remove the proposal's presupposition that Unitarianism and UUs have done and continue to do irresolvable harm to people of color, requiring accountability and discipline by a hierarchy of national church leaders over congregations. Reaffirm the accountability within a UU congregational context, or reaffirm that the accountability within a UU congregational context is a matter of personal conscience and congregational democratic process. Reframe the proposal to acknowledge that UU congregations and the UUA have done persistent justice work with strong anti-racist intent, though of course limited by awareness that is still growing and life demands and compartmentalizations that draw away energy too often. Fifth, recognize that our principles are a description of potentials for fullest spiritual development of persons and peoples, and that UUism's core mission is to help develop them. Sixth, out of 10, recognize the relatively low but growing proportion of people of color in UU congregations. Recognize that this relatively low proportion is probably mainly due not to microaggressions or inhospitality, but more to factors like geography, age demographics, differing subcultures and class backgrounds, and dissimilar church experience and expectations. As the Black Lives of UU symposium panelists seem generally to conclude a year and a half or so ago. Recognize that so-called microaggressions are an innate behavior in all humans, especially in new and unfamiliar settings, instinctive to protect sense of self and boundaries, but educable, reducible, even able to be eliminated. 8, recognize that quite likely the only truly effective path out of America's ingrained patterns of racism is to get acquainted, listen deeply, become friends, develop trust, help one another, defend one another, partner with one another in expanding coalitions for well-being, and vote to ensure one another's rights and blessings. 9, recognize that making connections across personalities and cultures builds community and is a skill set that congregations can develop. And lastly, be devoted. Be devoted to establishing comprehensive governmental policies and programs of reparation for slavery, colonial genocide, land usurpation, and labor exploitation, so that the current inequities they induced will end. Amen. Oh, and I should have added that there are 2 books or publications that are very worth our while to read. One is the COIC's document, Widening the Circle of Concern, that offers the critique that we've been talking about today. And the other is a book called Used to Be You, by Frank Casper and Jay Kiskell, with contributions by several UU ministers, which takes quite a different look at what has been happening in the Unitarian Universalist Association. So I recommend those 2 books to you both. Thank you.
To keep our congregation thriving, may we remember our connection to one another, and let us not forget our offerings to support the means to those connections. As you are listening to our brief offertory, to make a contribution, please click on the I in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You can also donate either via the Give Plus app, or on our website under the Giving tab. Or you may send a check to the church. Thanks.
Thank you everybody for being here today this morning. Please stay safe and well. We hope you can join us right after the service for our coffee hour at the Zoom address coming up shortly on your screen. Now as our service ends, with a breath we pass the light of our chalice lamp to each other as we say together. We
Extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of courage. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world.